everyone. Are you ready for a CCO Club webinar? It's number 119. One of our club members had a question specifically about E&M coding, and she was struggling with the 99214 and what constitutes systemic uh, symptoms and some other questions. And I thought, you know what? Let's just talk about uh, the 99214 E&M, what it takes to get to that level in the documentation. Let's break it up. Let's do it step by step and discuss it tonight. I wrote up some examples and I really would like to see your examples as well. So feel free when we're going through these to let me know of an example that pops into your head as we go along. The first thing that we want to do is talk about what 99214 is. That is the CPT E&M code for moderate medical decision making. We all know there was a significant change in the E&M leveling, and so some of us have struggled a little bit with, letting go of all of those points and ticks that we did on the graphs and stuff. But that wasn't me. I don't want you to say some of us. I didn't mean myself included, because this is the way I think, the way that we do it now. And I am thrilled about it. Back in the day, when I first started coding, E&M was difficult for me because I always based my thought of medical decision making or doing the E&M leveling off of what the diagnoses were. So of course, if a person had had just been diagnosed, say, with cancer, well, that's going to have high medical decision making. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? And then, but that's not the way it worked. You had to go through evaluating all the body systems, and did they look at this body system? You can't double dip, and everything. So it was difficult. So then when I started teaching it, I struggled as well, because again, the way I look at it, it isn't the way that the leveling is all put together. And now the pendulum has swung that it's based on the medical decision making, and that's ICD. That's all the diagnoses and what it takes to determine a diagnosis, or the side effects and the signs and symptoms. So again, this is perfect to my way of thinking. I love E&M now. Before, it was like, yeah, okay, we got to do it. And a little tidbit from the past, when I started, when I first found CCO, it was because of E&M coding. I was teaching for a private college, and my students weren't getting E&M, probably because I wasn't explaining it very well. And so uh, there was these videos popping up, and I was having my students watch them on YouTube for extra credit. And I believe they were on like Tuesday or Thursday nights. I can't even remember back then. This was a long time ago, over a decade ago. And when they watched the instructions on the E&M leveling, it made sense to them, and they were getting it. And so I started having them marking up their manuals from what's on the video. And guess what? That was the BAT technique, and that was Laureen. And that's how Laureen and I met, is through E&M. So again, E&M has a sweet spot in my heart, although back then I didn't enjoy it, but now it's a lot of fun. It makes a lot of sense to me, and hopefully it will to you, and I'll be able to explain it a little bit better now that they've changed it to my liking. Of course, that's why they did it, right? 99214. Let's talk about what 99214 is. The reason we're going to focus on one E&M versus all of the levels is this is, I think, the one that most people struggle with. Uh, this is a very common E&M level. Now, we could jump out and do new patient. We're not going to talk about this. Let's break it down. One code give all the details about it. Once you've got this under your belt, then the others will just fall into place. So the 99214 is an established patient. It's the office or other outpatient visit. It's for the E&M of an established patient which requires a medically appropriate history and or examination and moderate level of medical decision making. That's the key. Moderate level of medical decision making. Also, we could use time. And if we do use time for the E&M, then this would be 30 to 39 minutes total time spent on the encounter. Now, we're not going to talk about the time. That's somewhat of a no-brainer. That's a given. What we're going to talk about is what constitutes moderate level, and within those, give examples. You get examples with the AMA, but you only get a few examples. Let's give examples that we've experienced. And again, I'd like to have some of your opinions as we go along. Let's break down what moderate constitutes. Now, we are going to predominantly focus on the first column here, number and complexity of problems addressed, because the club member that submitted this question, this is where they were having problems. They specifically stated one acute illness with systemic symptoms or a one acute complicated illness and injury. They were struggling with systemic systems. What does that actually mean? So we're going to discuss that. Now, we'll discuss a little bit now here about amount of complexity of data and risk and patient management. But after we go through those, we're going to break down and give examples of the first column. Everything else I think is pretty straightforward, but let's talk about them going backwards. Let's start on the third column and then work our way into number and complexity of problems, and then do examples. When we look at risk of patient management, predominantly what they do is they just give you examples. Okay. Now, if you can think to your uh, uh, practices that you're in of types of risk of medical or of patient management, put it in the chat and I'll keep my eye on that. Now, when a patient has additional diagnostic testing or treatment done, make sure that if the test is ordered, that reading the test for that same provider is included. Okay, that's kind of in the middle column though. But prescription management, let's start with that. Anytime your provider manages a prescription, so that means they write a prescription even though the prescription has been written before, it's not a new prescription, then that is counted as part of the risk. If they change the prescription, again, that's prescription management. If they change the prescription because of the dose, if they change from one prescription to another prescription, that's all prescription management. Decision for minor surgery. Now, there's a lot of other information that is put on the E&M there. I've got it actually behind the screen on the slide deck, but just note that you kind of whittle it down. It just means decision for minor surgery. So the patient decides to have a toenail removed because it's died and they've cut that and it's starting to lift, or they have say oh, what's that called when it gets into the corner? I can't remember off the top of my head. What is that called when the toenail gets into the meat of the toe? If that happens, then they may choose to remove the toenail completely. That would be minor surgery. Decision for elective surgery. The patient has decided that they are having trouble seeing, and they have uh, kind of like the upper lid is hanging over, and it's making it difficult to see, then that can be removed. Well, that would be elective surgery usually. It says ingrown toenail. That's it. Thank you. Why could I not think of ingrown? I need you guys to help me tonight, I guess. It must have been Patricia. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, Patricia. So again, ingrown toenail, removal of the toenail, minor surgery. Maybe having have you ever seen they call them Bible cysts that are on top of the hand? Uh, uh, and predominantly the way they get rid of those is they smack it with the big heavy Bible. That's why they used to call them Bible cysts. But if they decide to go in and do surgery and have that removed, that would be minor surgery. But elective surgery, pretty forward decision for elective surgery. A diagnosis or treatment significantly limited by social determinations of health. Well, if you don't understand social determinations of health, you need to go look at one of our previous videos. We've done some that are in the club. We've got some out on YouTube free. Social determinations of health is the new thing that everybody's talking about. It is one of the quality measures that are being captured. There's several of them, from uh, being homeless, uh, losing your job, having a loss of a spouse. There's the all kinds of reasons that the social, you could call them social reasons, that your health might be impacted. I guess is kind of a layman's term to say that. So, a diagnosis or treatment significantly limited by social determinations of health. What if a patient was on insulin, they lost their job, lost their insurance, and they're having to pay out of pocket for their medications? That is definitely a diagnosis or treatment, the medication, that's limited by a social determination of health, them losing their job. And so that would be moderate risk, and one we don't always think about. Let's move to the middle column, amount and complexity of data. Again, it has to be moderate, and you have to meet one of the three categories. Now, I didn't write category one, category two, and category three. I just divided them with a little purple bar. Uh, so let's talk about what's in the first four examples. Review prior external note from each unique source. And I think that says unice, and it's supposed to say unique. So what does it mean to review prior external note from a unique source? Well, what if a consultation came in from out of town, when a patient used to live, say they lived in New York, they moved to Texas, and they had a consult regarding their CHF, and they bring that information with them, and the provider looks at it and reviews the documentation from that specialist that says that the patient has systolic CHF. Then again, that would be an external note that's being reviewed. How about review a test result? Now, reviewing and ordering a test. You can review a test result, but you don't get a point for reviewing a test result that you've already ordered. If you order a test, that includes reviewing that test result. This becomes a problem when you have tests ordered by a provider, and then they take credit for reviewing it, and then another provider reviews it, and wants to take credit for it. So be careful with that. How about assessment requiring an independent historian? Well, if you have a couple that comes in and the wife is starting to has a new diagnosis of dementia and is a poor historian, and the husband is the historian for the patient, then that would be again, uh, a rise in the medical decision making. It would become moderate. And then under the purple bar, let's talk about independent interpretation of a test performed by another provider, not separately reported. So that would be consultation reports. The um, the doctors that is treating the patient moved from Texas, from New York, and he brings him the consult that he had from a doctor in New York, and so he reads it, and then he says, this is 10 years old, and we need to have some new tests done. So they have more testing done, and then the provider reads the new cardiologist reports that come in. How about discussion of management of test interpretation with external provider? So whenever you have a management of tests or an interpretation with another provider regarding the patient's care, that bumps up the medical decision making, and you have to you you have to have more than just one of these items to be classified as moderate. The focus of tonight, though, is going to be in this first column, the number and complexity of problems